It started with a single dollar, a simple act of kindness. But what Barron Trump didn't know was that he had just changed everything. He could have walked past him. Everyone else did. New York streets at night weren't kind to the forgotten. The world moved fast. People had places to be, and the ones who didn't, they faded into the background, unnoticed, unseen. But something made Barron stop. It wasn't just the boy's ragged clothes, or the way he curled into himself against the cold. It wasn't even the way he sat perfectly still, as if he had learned to make himself invisible. No, it was something else. It was the way he was staring, not at the ground, not at his hands, but at the people walking past him, studying them, watching, as if he wasn't just homeless, but hiding. Barron had met his share of strangers before. He knew the difference between someone who was lost and someone who was running. And this kid, he was definitely running. Barron reached into his pocket and pulled out a 20. He knelt, offering it without a word. A pause. The boy doesn't move. His gaze flickers to the money, then back up to Barron's face. "I don't need your money." The voice was steady, too steady for someone shivering in the cold. Barron frowned. "Everyone needs money," he said simply. The boy exhaled, glancing away. His fingers twitched like he wanted to take it, like he had needed to take it for a long time. But something held him back. "Not me," he murmured. "Not anymore." A shift in the air. Barron doesn't move. "What's your name?" Silence. The rain keeps falling. The city keeps moving. The boy hesitates before answering. "Eli." A lie. Barron could feel it. The way Eli's eyes flicked downward, the way his body tensed ever so slightly. But Barron didn't press. "All right, Eli," he said. "Let me get you some food." Another pause, another flicker of hesitation, and then, "No." Barron raised an eyebrow. Eli's refusal was firm, but his hands had balled into fists, like he wasn't just turning down food, like he was afraid to accept it. "Why not?" Eli inhaled sharply, his fingers digging into his palms, and then, so quiet Barron almost missed it, he whispered, "Because if they see me with you, I'll be dead by morning." Barron had helped plenty of people before, but this was different. This wasn't just homelessness. This was something much, much worse. Barron Trump had heard a lot of excuses in his life, but fear wasn't an excuse, it was a warning. He studies Eli, watches the way his shoulders tighten, the way his eyes scan the street like a hunted animal. This wasn't just hunger, this was something worse. "Who's they?" Barron asked. Eli flinched, just barely. A tiny reaction, but Barron caught it. "It doesn't matter," Eli muttered. "I shouldn't have said that. Forget it." He reached for his ragged backpack as if he was about to stand, as if he was about to disappear into the streets, just another ghost among the forgotten. But Barron wasn't ready to let him vanish, not yet. "You're alone." Eli stilled. Didn't confirm, didn't deny, just sat there, silent. "No family." Silence. "No one looking for you?" Something flickered in Eli's expression, a shadow, a memory. He turned his face away, but Barron already saw the truth. "No one left to look for me," Eli murmured. The words hit harder than they should, and for some reason Barron felt it, deep in his chest, like an ache he couldn't place. "That's not true," Barron said quietly. Eli let out a dry, hollow laugh, the kind that didn't come from humor, but from a place so broken it had forgotten how to feel anything else. "Trust me," Eli whispered, "it is." Barron had a choice. He could let the kid go, pretend this was just another encounter with a stranger he would never see again. Or he could push. He didn't know why he cared. Maybe it was the fact that Eli's words sounded too much like someone who had already lost everything. Or maybe it was the look in his eyes, like he had stopped believing in the world a long time ago. "All right," Barron said, standing. "You don't want money, you don't want food. But you're freezing, and I know a place nearby where you can get warm for a few hours." Eli didn't respond, just kept staring at the sidewalk, fingers gripping the straps of his backpack. "No strings," Barron added. "Just shelter from the rain, that's all." A long, painful silence. Then Eli sighed, shaking his head. "You're persistent. You know that?" "I've been told," Barron said, folding his arms. "What's it going to be?" Another pause, and then Eli slowly got to his feet. He didn't say yes, but he didn't walk away either, and that was enough. Barron thought he was just offering shelter, a small act of kindness, but what he didn't realize was that he had just stepped into something far more dangerous. Barron had seen a lot of things in his life. He had met powerful men who could change a person's fate with a single phone call. He had been around wealth, influence, the kind of privilege most people never even imagined. But there was something about Eli that made Barron feel like none of that mattered. Like whatever this kid was running from, it didn't care about power or money. Eli walks beside him, hands in his pockets, head low. He doesn't say much, doesn't ask where they're going, just follows. Then suddenly, Eli stops. "We can't go this way," he says. Barron frowns, looks around. "Why not?" Eli doesn't answer immediately. His jaw tightens, his gaze flickers towards something across the street. Barron follows his line of sight, sees a black SUV parked near the curb. Tinted windows, engine running, the kind of car that didn't belong on a street like this. "Do you know them?" Barron asks. Eli doesn't respond. His hands curl into fists. His body tenses like a fight-or-flight response he can't control. "Eli," Barron presses. "Who are they?" A slow, shuddering breath. "The people I ran from." Barron doesn't move, doesn't speak, just watches as the SUV's passenger window lowers slightly, just enough for someone inside to see them. A shadow shifts inside, a glimpse of a figure, and then, just as quickly, the window rolls back up. The SUV doesn't leave, it just sits there, watching. "We need to go," Eli says, his voice tight with fear. "Now!" Barron doesn't argue. They turn, moving fast, but even as they walk, Barron can feel it. That creeping sensation that they aren't just being watched, they're being followed. Barron could have walked away, he should have, but something about this wasn't right, and for better or worse, he wasn't letting this go. As they move through the city, Barron finally speaks. "I need you to tell me the truth, Eli." Eli doesn't look at him. "What truth? Who are you really running from?" A tense pause. Then Eli reaches into his pocket, hands Barron a torn-up card, something faded, worn. Barron takes it, unfolds it, and what he sees makes his stomach drop. A government seal, a classification number, and beneath it 2 chilling words. Project Lazarus. Barron barely has time to react before Eli tugs his sleeve, whispering one last warning. "Don't ask questions you don't want the answers to." And with that, they disappear into the night. Eli wasn't just some lost kid. He wasn't just another runaway. And whatever Project Lazarus was, Barron had just stepped into something far, far bigger than himself. The city is alive. Neon lights flicker against the wet pavement. In the distance, a siren wails. Just another night in New York. But for Barron Trump, this isn't just another night. Barron held the torn card between his fingers, its edges worn from too much handling. The government seal was faded, but still recognizable. And beneath it, those 2 words. He knew better than to ask questions about things like this, but tonight, against all reason, he had already crossed that line. He glanced at Eli. The boy was tense, his arms wrapped tightly around himself as they weaved through the back streets. He didn't speak, didn't explain. He just moved, like someone who had spent a lifetime looking over his shoulder. "Eli," Barron finally said, his voice steady, "what is Project Lazarus?" Eli stiffened. "Forget it," he muttered. "I shouldn't have shown you that." Too late. Barron stepped in front of him, stopping Eli in his tracks. The boy flinched, eyes darting around. "You can't just drop something like this and expect me to walk away." Eli exhaled sharply, shaking his head. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You don't understand. The people looking for me, they don't stop. Ever. And now that you're involved, you won't be able to stop either." A long silence. Barron studied him carefully. "Then let's stop running." Eli's eyes snapped to his. "What? We find out who they are, what they want, and we take control of the game." Eli let out a dry laugh, but there was no humor in it. "You don't get it, do you? There is no game, there's only surviving." Barron's expression didn't change. He had seen power before. He had seen fear. But what he saw in Eli was something deeper, something closer to desperation. "If there's no game," Barron said quietly, "then why do they want you so badly?" Eli didn't answer, because he couldn't. Barron didn't know when he first noticed it, but the feeling had been creeping up on him since they left the diner. They weren't alone. At first it was just a shadow, a flicker of movement in the reflections of storefront windows, then a subtle shift in the rhythm of the city, a car that idled too long at a stoplight, a man reading a newspaper at midnight, a woman on her phone who hadn't spoken a word. Someone was watching. "Eli," Barron said under his breath, "are we being followed?" Eli didn't hesitate. He glanced over his shoulder, scanning the street. "Yes," the confirmation hit like a gunshot. "How many?" Barron asked. "At least 2 cars, maybe more." Eli's pulse pounded in his ears. The streetlights flickered overhead, and then a black SUV turned the corner. It was the same one from before, the one that had been parked outside the diner. And now it was moving toward them. "Time to go," Eli muttered, and then they ran. Barron had grown up around power. He knew what influence looked like, and whatever this was, it was bigger than anything he had ever seen. The world blurs. The only thing that matters now is movement. Dodging, sprinting, slipping through the cracks of the city like ghosts. The sound of footsteps, the low rumbling engine of the SUV behind them. The hunt has begun. Barron and Eli ran. They cut through alleyways, their breath sharp and ragged. Rainwater splashed beneath their feet. The SUV was still behind them, creeping forward like a predator, slow and deliberate. They weren't trying to grab them yet. They were cornering them. Barron could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He wasn't just out of his depth, he was drowning. But Eli? Eli had been running for longer than this. And right now, Barron's only option was to follow. "This way," Eli hissed, grabbing Barron's sleeve and yanking him down a side street. They skidded into a narrow alley, barely squeezing through a rusted metal gate. The SUV wouldn't fit, but that didn't mean they were safe. Footsteps echoed behind them, fast, heavy. Someone was on foot. Barron could hear the man closing in, could hear the rapid, measured breath of someone trained for this. A professional. "Eli," Barron panted, "who the hell are these people?" Eli didn't answer. He just kept moving. They burst out onto another street, but as soon as they did, another car appeared. Another SUV. They were being funneled. "They're hurting us," Barron realized. Eli's face was pale. He already knew. And then, a man stepped out of the second SUV. He wasn't dressed like a thug. He wasn't some street-level goon. He wore a dark suit, pressed and pristine. And when he spoke, his voice was calm. Enough! Eli's entire body went rigid. Barron could feel his panic rising. The man took a slow step forward. He didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't need to. "Come with me, Eli," the man said. "It's time to go home." Barron stepped between them before he even realized what he was doing. "Who are you?" Barron demanded. The man studied him for a long moment. His gaze was sharp, precise. Then slowly he smiled. "You don't need to know that, Mr. Trump." Barron's stomach dropped. He hadn't given his name. The man took another step closer. "I'll say this once," he continued. "Eli belongs to us. He always has. You were never meant to be part of this story. So be smart. Walk away." A pause, a slow creeping silence. "And if I don't?" Barron asked. The man's smile didn't change, but something in his eyes did, something cold. "Then I suggest you start running again. This wasn't just some lost kid. This was something else. And now Barron had just made himself a part of it. The world has changed. Barron can feel it. This isn't just about kindness anymore. This isn't about helping a stranger. This is about survival. Somewhere in the back of his mind, Barron knew he had made a mistake. A big one. The man in the suit hadn't raised his voice, hadn't pulled a gun. He didn't need to, because the power he carried wasn't physical. It was something bigger, something that told Barron exactly what kind of people he was dealing with. The kind of people who didn't need to threaten, the kind who simply made things disappear. And now, Barron had just made himself a problem. Eli's breathing was shallow. Barron could feel him tensing, see the way his fingers twitched like he was about to bolt. But something was wrong. He wasn't just scared, he was waiting. And then, in a heartbeat, he moved. Eli grabbed Barron's arm and jerked him backward, just as something whizzed through the air. A thin, sharp needle embedded itself in the brick wall where Barron's neck had been a second ago. A tranq dart. "Run!" Eli gasped. And they did. Barron had never run like this before. The city blurred around them, alleyways flashing by, neon signs glowing overhead, the sound of boots pounding against pavement. The men in suits weren't just chasing them, they were tracking them. Eli knew the streets. He ducked into places Barron didn't even know existed. Abandoned buildings, flooded subway tunnels, back streets too narrow for cars, and still their pursuers didn't stop. Barron felt it in his gut. They weren't supposed to escape. "Who the hell are these guys?" Barron gasped as they stopped for air behind a dumpster. Eli wiped sweat from his forehead, his eyes darting toward the street. "They're called a lot of things," he muttered. "The department, the program. But their real name doesn't matter. What matters is that they don't stop." "Why?" Eli hesitated, and then finally, he looked Barron in the eye. "Because of me." Eli wasn't just some runaway. He wasn't just another homeless kid, and whatever they had done to him, it was worth killing for. The streets are empty now. The world is quiet. Barron and Eli sit on a rooftop, breathing hard, the weight of the night settling between them. Barron had met liars before. He had met people who twisted the truth, who spun stories to fit their needs. But Eli? Eli wasn't lying, and that was the part that scared him the most. Barron turned the torn-up card over in his hands. The government seal was faded, but he could still read the words beneath it. "Tell me," Barron said. "No more running, no more excuses. What is Project Lazarus?" Eli exhaled, his hands tightening into fists. "It's not what you think," he murmured. "Then tell me what it is." Eli hesitated, and then he pulled up his sleeve. Barron frowned. At first he didn't see anything, just skin, pale under the moonlight. But then he noticed it, something beneath the surface, something moving, like shifting veins that pulsed under the skin. something unnatural. "Jesus," Barron whispered. Eli pulled his sleeve down quickly, his expression unreadable. "I wasn't born," Eli said. "I was made." Barron wanted to deny it, wanted to tell Eli he was being dramatic, paranoid. But deep down, he already knew it was true. The program's name wasn't random. Lazarus, the man who rose from the dead. Barron's mind raced. He had heard whispers of programs like this before, black-budget experiments, human trials that weren't supposed to exist. But Eli, he was proof that they did. "How?" Barron asked. Eli shook his head. "I don't know. I don't remember anything before waking up in a lab. No past, no family, just doctors in suits testing me like I was, I don't know, an experiment." A pause. Barron could hear the anger in his voice, the exhaustion. "Then one day," Eli continued, "I heard something I wasn't supposed to. And suddenly, I wasn't a test subject anymore. I was a loose end." Barron sat back, staring up at the night sky. The world had felt big before, but now it felt impossibly small. Because this wasn't just about Eli anymore. This was about who had created him and what they were still doing. Eli ran a hand through his hair, his voice quieter now. "They weren't trying to cure me, Barron. They were trying to create something." Barron's stomach twisted. "And did they?" A long pause. "I don't know," Eli admitted, "but I do know this. I wasn't the only one. There are some secrets worth killing for, and Barron was about to find out exactly why." The night is heavy with silence. Barron and Eli remain on the rooftop, breathing in the cold city air. The weight of the truth lingers between them, heavier than anything Barron has ever carried before. There are moments in life when the world splits in two, before and after. Barron knew this was one of those moments. Before tonight, he was just another name in a world of influence, a kid with privilege, eyes watching him everywhere he went. But after tonight, after what he had seen, he was something else entirely. Eli stared at the city below, his voice quieter than before. "You shouldn't have helped me." Barron frowned. "Why?" Eli swallowed hard. "Because now they'll never stop looking for you either." Barron wasn't naive. He knew they were in deep, knew that just walking away wasn't an option anymore. The men in suits had made that clear. "Then we stop running," Barron said. Eli blinked at him. "What?" "You said they'll never stop," Barron continued. "So we don't run, we fight." A silence. Eli let out a dry, humorless laugh. "You don't get it," he muttered. "You don't know what these people are capable of." "No, but I know how power works." Barron's eyes darkened, his mind racing. "These people aren't ghosts. They have names, they have secrets, and if they want to bury this, that means the truth is worth something." Eli studied him carefully, like he was seeing Barron for the first time. "What are you suggesting?" "We go after them first," Barron said simply. "We expose them before they can make us disappear." Eli hesitated. Then slowly he reached into his backpack and pulled out a burner phone. The plastic casing was cracked, the screen scratched, but it still worked. "There's someone we can meet," Eli admitted. "Someone who helped me before. He knows things, more than me." "Can we trust him?" Barron asked. Eli exhaled. "We don't have a choice." They made the call. A location was set, a safe house in the Bronx, an old storage unit repurposed into a meeting place. They had a name now, a lead. For the first time, they weren't running. They were moving toward something. Barron could feel the momentum shifting. He had spent his life learning how people operated, how influence shaped the world. And now he was going to use it for something real. But he didn't know one thing. He didn't know that this meeting wasn't just a lead, it was a setup. Some betrayals are predictable, others cut too deep to see coming. The safe house is dark, silent. The air is thick with tension. Eli and Barron move carefully, the weight of unseen eyes pressing in around them. Barron had never been in a place that felt so hollow. The storage unit was exactly where the contact said it would be, hidden behind an abandoned auto shop. The door was unlocked, waiting. Too easy. Eli walked ahead, his breath unsteady. He glanced at Barron, his fingers twitching. "Something's wrong," he murmured. Barron nodded. He felt it too. They stepped inside. The space was empty, except for a single chair in the center of the room. And on that chair, a tape recorder. Barron's pulse pounded. Eli moved first, pressing play. The static-filled silence only lasted a second before a voice crackled through the speaker. "You should have stayed gone, Eli." Eli's breath hitched. Barron's stomach turned to ice. "You brought the wrong people into this. You think power makes you untouchable, Barron Trump? You're about to find out how wrong you are." And then, from outside, footsteps, heavy, moving fast. "Run!" Eli didn't hesitate. He grabbed Barron's wrist and pulled. The door behind them slammed open. Shadows flooded in. Men, armed, moving like a well-trained unit. They had seconds. Barron and Eli sprinted through the storage unit, knocking over shelves, breaking through the back exit. A gunshot rang out, splitting the night. A warning. They weren't trying to kill them yet. They were trying to corner them. Barron had been chased before, by reporters, by photographers, by security details that wanted to keep him safe. But this was different. This was a hunt. They burst into an alley, feet pounding against the pavement. The cars were coming, SUVs, headlights flashing, engines roaring. "We're not getting out of this," Eli gasped. "Yes, we are," Barron shot back. "Keep moving!" The city blurred. A fence, a leap. Barron's fingers scraped metal as he hauled himself over, Eli right behind him. A siren blared in the distance. Someone had heard the commotion, but would it matter? They hit the ground on the other side, kept running, kept moving, kept breathing, and somehow, they were still alive. They didn't stop running until the city swallowed them whole, until the men in suits were gone. Only then did Barron turn to Eli, his breath heavy, his heart slamming against his ribs. "You trusted the wrong person," he said. Eli wiped blood from his lip, his face tight with frustration. "No," he murmured, "I trusted the right person. He just ran out of time." A long silence. Barron looked down at the tape recorder, still clutched in Eli's hands. "Then we find another way." Eli didn't respond at first, just stared at Barron, as if searching for something. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" Barron met his gaze, unwavering. "They made this my problem when they came after me." A slow breath. And then Eli nodded. "All right, let's end this. Some people spend their whole lives trying to stay invisible, but Barron had spent his whole life being seen, and now he was going to use it. The city is quieter now. The chase is over for now, but the battle is just beginning. There are moments that define you, moments that carve a line between who you were and who you will become. Barron knew this was one of those moments. He could feel it, the weight of everything pressing down on him. The exhaustion, the adrenaline, the knowledge that there was no going back. Eli sat beside him in the dimly lit warehouse they had found, his breath still unsteady. The tape recorder lay between them, the message inside still fresh, still pulsing with the weight of its warning. "You still have a chance to walk away," Eli said, his voice hoarse. "You don't owe me anything." Barron exhaled slowly. He had spent his whole life in a world of power. A world where people only acted if there was something in it for them. But this wasn't about that. This wasn't about winning. This was about doing the right thing. "That's where you're wrong," Barron said quietly. "I owe you the truth." A pause. A flicker of something in Eli's expression. Hope, maybe, or something close to it. "So what now?" Eli asked. Barron leaned back, staring up at the ceiling. He already knew the answer. "We finish this." Barron had spent his life being watched. He had learned how the world worked, how influence shaped every decision. And now? Now he was going to use it. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through his contacts, found the name he was looking for. A journalist, the kind that didn't take bribes, the kind that didn't look away when the truth was ugly. "It's time people know about Lazarus." Eli's eyes widened. "You're going public?" "Not yet," Barron said. "First, we make sure they can't bury this. We give them something they can't erase." Eli hesitated. Then slowly he nodded. The next morning, the first piece of the story leaked. A classified government project, a missing test subject, a chase through the streets of New York. It wasn't enough to bring them down, not yet. But it was enough to make sure people were looking. Barron knew how these things worked. Power didn't disappear overnight. But if you put enough light on the right places, sometimes the shadows had nowhere left to hide. And Project Lazarus? It was officially in the light now. Eli stood by the warehouse doors, backpack slung over his shoulder. He looked lighter, somehow, like a part of the weight he had carried for so long had finally been lifted. "You sure you don't want to come with me?" Barron asked. Eli smirked. "Nah," he said. "You're the one who belongs in the spotlight. I do better in the dark." A pause, a shared understanding. Then Eli held out his hand. Barron shook it. "You saved my life," Eli said quietly. "No," Barron corrected. "You saved your own. I just made sure someone was watching when you did." Eli smiled. And then, just like that, he was gone. Barron Trump never saw Eli again. But he heard the whispers. The Lazarus Project had been exposed, at least enough to make sure it never went unnoticed again. The people who had chased Eli had gone quiet, at least for now. But Barron knew better than to think this was over, because there were always more secrets, always more shadows waiting just beyond the light. And as Barron stepped out into the streets, blending into the moving crowd, he realized something. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. Eli disappeared into the night, but his name, his story, that would never disappear again. Because the greatest battles aren't fought with fists, they're fought with the truth. And as for Barron, he wasn't just a spectator anymore. He was part of the game now. And the people in power, they knew it. A pause, the sound of a phone vibrating. A new message appears on the screen. "Unknown number. Nice move, Mr. Trump. Let's see how long you can keep playing." The screen fades to black. "Checkmate,"